evolutionarily over generations. Thus, since brain function and structure are dynamic, then language must be dynamic too. However, results from cognitive linguistics, so far, do not take the temporal progression into consideration. It merely describes facts about the use of language under certain solid conditions. Embodiment as consciousness, or as unconscious. There is a common misconception that studying a mental process means we are actually conscious of it. Nevertheless, that is not the case in cognitive linguistics. For example, our brain slices sound waves into phonemes unconsciously. Such process is studied using techniques like EEG, which is not informative about whether neurolinguistics processes are conscious or not. 2 key commitments. 2 basic commitments were described by George Lakoff in 1990. These 2 commitments are the basis of orientation and approach, followed by cognitive linguists. The generalization commitment. The aim of the generalization commitment is to pinpoint the broadest generalizations, thus molding and understanding general rules that fit all aspects and characteristics of human language. Since this commitment seeks generalization of principles of language, the previous ways of studying the language, like semantics, the meaning of words, and meaning, phonology, sound, and morphology, word structure, won't be suitable because there is little room for generalization. The cognitive commitment. The cognitive commitment aim is to characterize the general principles of used language that are consistent with what is known about brain anatomy and functions from other sciences. So, this core philosophy of this commitment is that rules of the used language should agree with what is known about cognition from other sciences, especially psychology and cognitive neuroscience. Areas of study. Cognitive linguistics has divided into 3 main areas of study. Cognitive semantics, dealing mainly with lexical semantics, separating semantics, meaning, into meaning construction and knowledge representation. Cognitive approaches to grammar, dealing mainly with syntax, morphology, and other traditionally more grammar-oriented areas. Cognitive phonology, dealing with classification of various correspondences between morphemes and phonetic sequences. Aspects of cognition that are of interest to cognitive linguists include construction grammar and cognitive grammar, conceptual metaphor, and conceptual blending, image schemas and force dynamics, conceptual organization, categorization, metonymy, frame semantics, and iconicity, construal and subjectivity, gesture and sign language, linguistic relativity, cultural linguistics, related work that interfaces with many of the above themes, computational models of metaphor and language acquisition, dynamical models of language acquisition, conceptual semantics, pursued by generative linguist Rajak and Duff, is related because of its active psychological realism in the incorporation of prototype structure and images. Cognitive linguistics, more than generative linguistics, seeks to mesh together these findings into a coherent whole. A further complication arises because the terminology of cognitive linguistics is not entirely stable, both because it is a relatively new field and because it interfaces with a number of other disciplines. Insights and developments from cognitive linguistics are becoming accepted ways of analyzing literary text too. Cognitive poetics, as it has become known, has become an important part of modern stylistics, controversy and Noam Chomsky's view. There is significant peer review and debate within the field of linguistics regarding cognitive linguistics. Critics of cognitive linguistics have argued that most of the evidence from the cognitive view comes from the research in pragmatics and semantics, and research in metaphor and preposition choice. They suggest that cognitive linguists should provide cognitive reanalyses of topics in syntax and phonology that are understood in terms of autonomous knowledge. Gibbs, 1996. There's also controversy and debate within the field concerning the representation and status of idioms in grammar, and the actual mental grammar of speakers. On one hand, it is asserted that idiom variation needs to be explained with regard to general and autonomous syntactic rules. Another view says such idioms do not constitute semantic units and can be processed compositionally. Langlotz 2006. In his lectures and many of his publications, Noam Chomsky discussed the cognitive components that are related to the languages and its use. In other words, studying language as a branch of cognitive sciences, he thinks that the two fields address language aspects that are complementary to each other. However, he believes that his generative grammar, linguistic theory and cognitive linguistic philosophical foundations oppose each other. He also believes that cognitive linguistics needs to accept some foundation from the theory of generative grammar. Phonology. Phonology is a branch of linguistics concerned with the systematic organization of sounds in spoken languages and signs in sign languages. It used to be only the study of the systems of phonemes in spoken languages, and therefore used to be also called phonemics or phonematics, but it may also cover any linguistic analysis either at a level beneath the word, including syllable, onset and rhyme, articulatory gestures, articulatory features, mora, etc., or at all levels of language where sound or signs are structured to convey linguistic meaning. Sign languages have a phonological system equivalent to the system of sounds in spoken languages. The building blocks of signs are specifications for movement, location, and hand shape. Terminology. Word phonology, as in the phonology of English, can also refer to the phonological system, sound system, of a given language. This is one of the fundamental systems which a language is considered to comprise, like its syntax and its vocabulary. Phonology is often distinguished from phonetics. While phonetics concerns the physical production, acoustic transmission and perception of the sounds of speech, phonology describes the way sounds function within a given language or across languages to encode meaning. For many linguists, phonetics belongs to descriptive linguistics and phonology to theoretical linguistics, although establishing the phonological system of a language is necessarily an application of theoretical principles to analysis of phonetic evidence. Note that this distinction was not always made, particularly before the development of the modern concept of the phoneme in the mid-20th century. Some subfields of modern phonology have a crossover with phonetics in descriptive disciplines, such as psycholinguistics and speech perception, resulting in specific areas like articulatory phonology or laboratory phonology. Derivation and definitions. The word phonology comes from ancient Greek phone, voice, sound, and the suffix logi, which is from Greek logos, word, speech, subject of discussion. Definitions of the term vary. Nikolai Trubetskoy, Grundzüge der Phonologie, 1939, defines phonology as the study of sound pertaining to the system of language, as opposed to phonetics, which is the study of sound pertaining to the act of speech. The distinction between language and speech being basically Saussure's distinction between langue and parole. More recently, Lass 1998 writes that phonology refers broadly to the subdiscipline of linguistics concerned with the sounds of language, while in more narrow terms, phonology proper is concerned with the function, behavior, and organization of sounds as linguistic items. According to Clark et al. 2007, it means the systematic use of sound to encode meaning in any spoken human language, or the field of linguistics studying this use. History. Yearly evidence for a systematic study of the sounds in a language appears in the 4th century BCE Ashtadhyayi, a Sanskrit grammar composed by Panini. In particular, the Shiva Sutras, an auxiliary text to the Ashtadhyayi, introduces what may be considered a list of the phonemes of the Sanskrit language, with a notational system for them that is used throughout the main text, which deals with matters of morphology, syntax and semantics. The study of phonology as it exists today is defined by the formative studies of the 19th century Polish scholar Jan Badwan de Courtenay, who, together with his students Mikołaj Kraszewski and Lev Sherba, shaped the modern usage of the term phoneme in a series of lectures in 1876 to 1877. The word phoneme had been coined a few years earlier in 1873 by the French linguist A. de Friche Desgenets. In a paper read at the 24th of May meeting of the Société de Linguistique de Paris, de Frisch Destinets proposed that phonemes serve as a one-word equivalent for the German Sprachlaut, but Baudouin de Courtenay's subsequent work, though often unacknowledged, is considered to be the starting point of modern phonology. He also